wind tore low across the plains, whistling through the bare cottonwoods like it was searching for something lost. Snow, not yet heavy, fell in thin slants, catching in the bramble of sage and the broken bones of fence posts. The land stretched out endless and pale, interrupted only by a black dot near the horizon, a woman walking, shoulders hunched, dragging behind her a homemade sled lashed with twine and stripped of its paint. Two children clung to its sides, their faces red from cold, their eyes too quiet for their age. Her boots were cracked. One sole flapped loose. She walked anyway, each step cutting into her, each breath scraping at the hollow in her chest. The baby, bundled in quilts and bound to her back, hadn't cried since morning. She didn't know if that was good or bad anymore. All she knew was that night was closing in, and they had no shelter. The road had long since turned to nothing, just ice minus veined earth and the ghost tracks of wagons that passed before the last snowfall. No smoke ahead, no cabins, no bark of a dog. Just wind, cold as a blade, and sky falling like a lid. She stopped, not because she could, but because she had to. The girl, her oldest, barely 7, had begun to cough again, deep and dry. It rattled in her small ribs like something stuck. Rest, the woman murmured, voice so soft it blew away on the wind. She knelt beside them, tugging the quilt tighter around the girl, checking the boy's hands to make sure the mittens hadn't slipped. Her fingers ached with numbness. She pressed her palm to the baby's back, slow, just to feel the rise and fall. Still breathing, still warm. For now, there was a tree ahead, just one. A naked cottonwood leaning east from too many years of wind. She looked to it like a drowning woman watching driftwood. It wasn't shelter, but it might break the wind long enough for them to sleep, or at least not die standing. The ground beneath the tree was uneven, half minus frozen. She kicked it once, then dropped to her knees and began clearing a spot. Her hands bled from the cold. She didn't stop. The children had curled together on the sled, watching with those old, knowing eyes that kids get when they've seen too much too young. Not a word between them. They understood what was being done, what was being said. By the time she had a fire built, just twigs and a single flint spark held in the hollow of her palm's night had nearly swallowed the sky. The flames were weak, sputtering against the wind, but she held her body around them like a shield, pulled the children close, held them there. The baby stirred, whimpered once, then fell back to sleep. She hadn't cried since the burial. Not when the sheriff came with the notice. Not when the preacher said there was no money for a plot. Not even when she had packed what was left in a feed sack and left the sod house behind, knowing it would never be hers again. But sitting there, skin raw, children pressed against her like branches straining toward a dying sun, something cracked. A small sound escaped her throat, and then it was quiet again. The wind moved on. The fire burned low. She could see the stars, faint behind the clouds, cold and disinterested. Her husband's voice came back to her sometimes, not like a memory, but like an echo from a canyon hollow too far off to chase. H.E.D. been a good man once, then the drought, then the cattle died, then the bottle, then the sickness, and then the burial with no sermon. The baby twitched in sleep, a hand reaching up to her shoulder. She kissed the top of its head. Her lips cracked. She had no plan, no destination, only west. The map, what little she remembered, said there were settlements near the river, places where a woman might clean or cook, or so if her hands could still manage thread. If not, then maybe a church would take the children. Maybe they'd grow up whole. Her eyes drifted shut, not from peace, from exhaustion. Still, she listened to the wind, to the children breathing, to the fire breathing smaller and smaller, and then something changed. A sound almost swallowed by wind. Not hoofs, not wheels, boots. She did not open her eyes. Not at first. She waited, breath held. The children were already asleep. A man's voice, low and uncertain, "Mum." She opened her eyes. He stood a few yards off, backlit by a lantern he held out in front of him. His coat was worn, dusted in snow. A rifle slung across his back. A horse behind him, steam rising from its nostrils. He didn't step forward. He didn't move at all. She said nothing. He tried again. "You need help?" Her voice came out cracked. We're not dying. They paused. Then, quiet, not yet, you mean? He looked past her to the children, to the fire barely alive, to the sled. Then, he said nothing else. Just bent slightly, not with pity, but something gentler, and held the lantern a little higher. He didn't ask permission. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, as if not to spook a wounded thing. The lantern's glow reached her face, and she turned her cheek slightly, not in shame, but caution. The man stopped an arm's length away and looked down at the children. You headed somewhere? She didn't answer, just stared at him, trying to read what kind of man he was in the way he held his hands, how he looked at her kids, how his jaw moved when he was speaking. He didn't press, just knelt near the fire and pulled out a tin box from his coat pocket. Inside was hard biscuit, wrapped in cloth. He placed it near the fire without a word, as if it had fallen there by accident. The boy opened his eyes and stared at the food. His little hand twitched toward it, then paused, waiting on his mother. Go on, she said. They are late. Not enough to fill, but enough to feel like life might go on for another few hours. The woman chewed slowly, watching the man as he unstrapped a canvas roll from the saddle and laid it near the fire. Inside was a kettle, a flint, and something wrapped in wax paper. Coffee, he said, half to himself. I ain't much, but it's hot. She didn't touch it, not at first, but the warmth in her hands made her breath catch. He looked at the fire, not at her. I got a cabin east a mile, if you want it. Roof, stove, not much else. Just me there. Her eyes narrowed. What do you want? Nothing, she snorted. A small, cold sound. He didn't flinch. You don't have to come. Just offering a roof till the storm clears. The girl leaned into her mother's side, whispering something she couldn't hear. The boy was already nodding off again, mouth stained with crumbs. The man stood. You'll wait a minute. If you change your mind. He stepped back toward the horse, careful not to crowd her, pulled a blanket from his saddlebag and laid it over the children like it was his only spare. She watched him, the way he moved, balanced, unhurried, not the swagger of a man used to taking, but the steadiness of one who's lost things before. Something inside her, brittle and thin, began to shift. Not trust, not yet, but the edge of something softer. She stared at the children, curled like pups against the fire, then looked out toward the blank, snow-covered miles. She stood, slowly, shoulders stiff from cold and grief. I don't have money. I don't need it. If you try to touch my kids, I won't. A long silence passed between them. Then she bent and began to gather what little they had. The rope, the quilt. Her hands fumbled, not from cold, but the strange, animal instinct that flared when change comes too fast. He didn't help, just watched, quietly, then turned and started leading the horse. She followed. The snow fell harder now, but the man knew where he was going. She could see the tracks behind him filling already, the wind clawing them close. They walked in silence. Only the squeak of boots, the crunch of the sled. The baby slept through it all, warm against her back, chest rising and falling against her spine. The cabin lost much. One room, logs stacked tight, a stovepipe thin and bent like an old man's finger. But the moment she stepped inside, it felt like something broke open inside her chest. Hed left the fire going, wood stacked, blankets folded, a bucket of water not yet frozen. The man cleared his throat. He'll stay in the lean -2 out back. Got a cot there. He'll bring more wood in the morning. She looked at him, tried again to see the catch, the danger. What's your name? Elias, he said, quiet. You? Naomi. He nodded once, touched the brim of his hat without quite tipping it, then stepped outside. The door shut behind him. She stood there a long time, too tired to move. The children already crawling to the pile of blankets on the floor, whispering and wide-minded aside, like they'd stumbled into a dream. Naomi sank to her knees near the stove and held her hands to the heat. Her body shook, but it washed from cold anymore. It was something else, a thing between fear and relief, something she didn't have words for. Outside, the wind howled, but in here, there was quiet. The story does not end here. Subscribe and continue with us to what lies beyond. Morning came slow. Light seeped in through the crooked window like smoke, gray and thin. Naomi opened her eyes to the sharp ache of muscles that had not rested, only pause. The baby was still asleep, belly full from last night's bread and heat. The girl and boy lay beside her, their feet tangled, faces soft in a way she hadn't seen in weeks. She sat up, blanket falling from her shoulders. The fire had gone two coals, but warmth lingered in the cabin. She moved quietly, poured what was left of the bucket into the kettle, and set it on the stove. Outside, a door creaked open. Then boots on snow, steady and slow. She opened the door before he could knock. Elias stood there with a small armful of wood, his shoulders hunched slightly against the wind. He met her eyes, but didn't look too long. "Mornin'," he said. "Fire still going?" She nodded. He stepped past her, set the wood near the hearth, and dusted off his coat. Naomi watched him, unsure what to say. There was a gentleness in how he moved, but no weakness. He handled things like he'd done it 100 times, quiet, efficient, used to being alone but not rattled by company. "You got food?" she asked, not unkindly. He shook his head. "Some oats. Salt. Not much else." She pressed her lips together. "I can cook, if you've got a pan." "Bottom shelf," he said, gesturing. "Coffee, too." She found the pan, rusted but solid, and poured water in to boil. The children stirred with the smell of heat and safety. They didn't speak, just watched her. She moved slower than she used to, unsure how to be in someone else's space. Elias stepped outside again without explanation. When he came back, he held the eggs in a rag. "And not lay much," he said, offering them. Naomi took them without a word. They ate in silence, the children first. Elias stood near the door while they finished, hands in his pockets. When the food was gone and the cabin quiet again, Naomi rose and faced him. "You said you live here alone?" He nodded. "No wife?" "No." She hesitated. "No one?" "My brother before. He died the winter's back. Left the land to me." Naomi's eyes dropped. "Sorry." He gave a half shrug, not dismissive, just tired. "It was pneumonia. Same way my mother went." She studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the way he looked at the floor when he talked about family. There was no performance in it, just plain truth. "I had a husband," she said, "but HES did. I figured." She let that sit for a moment. "I won't stay long," she added. "Just long enough to get my bearings. Maybe find work. I can sew men clean." Elias nodded. "A couple places near the river settlements need help come spring. You could ride out with the peddlers when they pass through. And until then, I got work here if you want it. Chopping, washing, help with the fence when it thaws." Naomi tilted her head. "You'll pay me." "He'll feed you," he said. "Keep you warm. That's all I've got." She considered it, then nodded. "Then he'll earn it." Over the next days, they fell into rhythm, not friends, not yet, but not strangers either. Naomi swept the cabin. She boiled water, cleaned out cupboards, aired the blankets. Elias brought in wood, repaired a broken hinge, and took the boy out to show him where the water barrel sat under the eave. He didn't hover. He didn't ask questions. On the third day, she followed him to the shed and asked for an axe. "You ever split logs?" "No." He handed it to her. "He'll show you." She watched, arms crossed tight over her chest, as he placed the log upright and struck it clean down the middle. "Don't muscle it," he said. "Let the weight do the work." She tried, missed once, then again. He didn't laugh. "Step in," he said. "Keep your stance wide." The third swing caught and stuck halfway. She cursed under her breath, then yanked the axe free. This time it split. A clean break. Elias gave a nod. "There you go." She didn't smile, but her shoulders eased. That night the children slept close again, bellies full of cornmeal and beans. Naomi sat by the fire, her fingers sore, back aching, but warm. Elias sat near the window, sharpening his knife. She broke the silence. "You ever think of leaving?" He looked up. "I did once, after my brother passed." "What stopped you?" He considered. "This land. Might not be worth much to others, but it's all I got that was taken." Naomi looked at the children at their stillness. "Yeah," she said. "I know the feeling. Snow thawed slow that year. By late March, the ground began to open its mouth again. Patches of earth showed like bruises beneath the ice. The wind still carried winter in its breath, but the sun lasted longer each day, casting longer shadows across the prairie. Mud clung to boots, and the fields turned soft underfoot. Naomi didn't complain. She liked the feel of dirt again. Dirty meant the world was waking. She rose before the children most mornings, swept the floor, fed the stove, filled the basin with cold water and splashed it across her face. Her hair had grown wild, too long for neatness, too short for braids, but she tied it back with a scrap of cloth and pulled on the coat Elias had given her. Men's coat too big in the sleeves, but warm and real and hers for now. Elias worked the land when the frost let him. He dug out the trough, mended the barn roof, laid new wire along the fence. Naomi began to help without asking. She cleared stones from the pasture, hauled buckets, watched the girl and boy as they learned how to gather eggs without breaking them. They didn't talk much in those early hours, but slowly, something grew between them, not soft, not tender, but steady, like rope drawn tight. There were looks, quiet ones, shared across the table or in passing outside the shed. Elias would sometimes hand her a mug of coffee without words. She'd take it, nod. That was enough. Then came the letter. Naomi found it in the saddlebag one evening while gathering rags, folded, worn at the corners, addressed in neat hand, not seal. She stared at it a long time before setting it on the table. When Elias came in, his boots heavy with mud, he saw it and froze. "You can read it," he said. "I didn't." "You can." She waited. He didn't move. "Is it from a woman?" He shook his head. "From a lawyer. In Abilene." She raised her chin. "Go on then." He stepped forward, took the letter, and sat down. His eyes moved slow over the page. Then he laid it flat and rubbed the back of his neck. "My father had land. I didn't know. He died last year. Left it to me. 200 acres near the Brazos." Naomi didn't speak. She just stood there, heart tight. "You'll go?" she asked. Not quite a question. "I might. It's good land. Could start over. And leave this." Elias looked around the small cabin, the walls he built with his brother, the worn rug by the stove, the children's shoes lying neatly near the door. "I don't know," he said, voice low. Naomi crossed her arms. "You'd be a fool to stay here. This land's barely breathing." He met her eyes. "You'd be a fool to leave." Silence stretched between them, thick and restless. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to ask if he meant her, but the words wouldn't come. So she just nodded once, like she understood, and turned away to check the stew. Later, after the children were asleep, she sat outside on the stoop. The stars were out, bright and sharp as nails. The prairie was quiet, but not dead. Frogs somewhere, maybe far off. And now, the door opened. Elias stepped out, sat beside her, arms resting on his knees. "I could use help," he said. "If I go?" She didn't look at him. "You will. It needs someone who can cook, keep the place steady. You could find a woman for that. One who didn't show up dragging 3 kids and no past." He turned toward her. "I don't want just anyone." The air felt thinner suddenly, like all the space between them had been drawn up. She looked down at her hands. They were cracked, raw at the knuckles. The hands of someone who fought for every piece of survival. "You sure?" she asked. Elias leaned back, eyes on the sky. "No, but I ain't even sure of anything in years." And this he gestured toward the cabin, toward her. "This feels closer than most." Naomi let out a long breath. The baby cried once from inside. She stood, ready to go in. "You've got time to think," he said, quiet behind her. "But if you want to come, you've got a place." She didn't answer, just paused at the door, then said, almost to herself, "Well, see come spring." Spring did come, not in a flood or with flowers, but in slow, hard -1 inches. The snow vanished, pulled back into the dirt like a secret taken back. Buds showed on the cottonwoods. The creek began to murmur again, thin and unsure. The children took off their coats one afternoon and ran barefoot through the mud until Naomi scolded them and wrapped their feet in rags that night, praying they wouldn't catch chill. She had stayed. No promise made, no talks of love, just a quiet decision, like stepping from one stone to the next, over cold water. She cooked, worked the land, helped Elias plan. He began to speak more, never too much, but enough. Stories of his brother, of the storm that collapsed the old barn, of his mother's hands, how they never stopped moving. He was different than her husband, not better, just real. A man of few words but deep thoughts. He didn't drink, he didn't shout, he listened. And when he touched her shoulder one evening after supper, his hand was rough but kind. The first time they laughed was when the boy dropped the water bucket, then stood there blinking, soaked head to toe, like it hadn't occurred to him that the water could spill. Naomi doubled over, wiping her eyes with her apron. Elias leaned against the doorframe, grinning like a man seeing sun after too long. They began planning the move in mid-May. Elias straightened to hides and a spool of wire for a second mule. Naomi packed everything they owned into 2 crates, blankets, thread, the sewing needle wrapped in cloth like a relic. The children were quieter than usual, unsure if this was another end or a beginning. "I've never seen the Brazos," Naomi said once while folding shirts near the window. Elias glanced up. "It's slower than you think." "White, green." She nodded. "Sounds better than dust." "It's not a promise," he added. "Just a place." "I don't need promises," she said. That night, they sat on the porch, the lantern between them, fireflies flickering low near the grass. The baby slept in Naomi's lap. The older two curled against the doorframe with blankets around their shoulders. Elias broke the silence. "I never asked if you wanted more." "More what?" "Children. Life. This." She looked out into the darkness. "I wanted peace," she said. "I didn't think that was asking too much. Turns out it was." He nodded. "I can't give you everything." "I don't want everything," she said, turning to face him. "Just a place to set it all down. To stop running." His voice came quieter than she had ever heard it. "Then that's what we'll build." The last morning on the prairie, Naomi rose before the sun. She walked to the edge of the field, where the ground had once buckled under the weight of frost, and looked out at the land that had taken so much from her. She didn't cry, just stood there a moment and whispered, "Thank you," though she wasn't sure why or to what. The wagon was packed by midday. The children climbed in, eyes wide. The baby kicked her feet in Naomi's arms, reaching for the wind. Elias took the reins. Naomi sat beside him, her hand near his on the bench. Not touching, just near. As they crested the hill, the cabin behind them grew small, then vanished. Ahead lay trees, a long road, the river, still unseen. They didn't speak, just rode. But Naomi felt something rise in her chest, not joy, not yet, but hope. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that hums. A ring, still too soon to wear, sat hidden in Elias's coat pocket. She hadn't seen it yet. He was sure when had she to give it. But the future waited, not in grand ways, not with noise, but with a house that would need fixing, a child learning to speak, a table set for 5. The wind changed, warmer now. Naomi reached over, let her hand rest lightly on Elias's arm. And they kept riding. Stay with us for more tales where mercy defies the rope and love outlives the law. Subscribe now.